Welcome back. The Internal Revenue Service is scaling its digitalization effort after a successful first step. That effort could get a jump start from the funding the agency will get from the Inflation Reduction Act. Harrison Smith is Director of Enterprise Digitalization at the IRS. Harrison, welcome. It's great to have you on the program. Where are you in this digitalization effort? What are you working on now, and where have you come from?
I thank you, Francis, for having me, first of all, but that's also a fantastic way to push it. Digitalization did not first start today or yesterday or last year. This has been an ongoing progress that the Internal Revenue Service has been working on for some time. I think there are opportunities now that we absolutely would not have if it hadn't been for the great work of the folks who have been here for a week or a year or a decade before we got here. So I think that's the first thing that's really important to note. This is part of the ongoing progression. I think where we came from was a targeted ability to provide information into our systems that helped us move on and understand what taxpayers were providing us. Where we are today is a more robust understanding of where we are and perhaps what taxpayers might need or what they might benefit from. Previously, for instance, we might enter in information into modernized e-file using manual transcriptions. Now we're pursuing and are frankly showing a good deal of promise on the ability of technology and a different approach to extract that information from a piece of paper and then e-file it. It's a faster process. It allows us to capture more information, but it's something we continue to work on and continue to improve.
How much of the work that you're doing is putting technology in place, and how much of the work that you're doing is trying to change culture of an organization like the IRS? Not picking on them, the entire federal government likes to do things the way they've always done them.
I think we as human beings like to do that,
that's
right?
fair.
I take the same way to work every day because it's comfortable and allows me to do and think about other things. But your point remains, Francis. It is something that we have to focus on, and quite frequently the efforts around technology writ large or digitalization specifically involve us changing how we look at things, and just as processes improve, I think cultures improve as well. So our ability to highlight things that we want to work on and look at not only technology, but our business processes and the office decisions that we make in utilizing those processes is really, really important. Ironically, or not, depending on how you want to ask the question, some of the improvements that we've been able to make in the digitalization space and in the innovation space have had nothing to do with technology. It's been about making targeted decisions about how we optimize the use of that existing technology stack or prepare us for future technologies. And I think when you're able to find that sort of that grouping, that amalgamation of incentives and where you can take a risk, because sometimes you don't ever want to take a risk in a space, but how do we make targeted improvements and understand how we can make those changes quickly?
Who are the stakeholders that are helping you understand what the end users' needs are, what the taxpayers' needs are, what the other users around the agency are, all of that?
So there are a lot of partners here. Within the IRS proper, if you will, Ken Corbin and his team in wage and investment and submissions processing, they are certainly a primary focal area. The Chief Information Officer and the IT department obviously help us understand what might be possible or not. Friends in privacy and disclosure, they're also really supporting how we handle the paper. I think what's been particularly beneficial is our ability to reach out and talk to industry partners who we work with, and frankly industry partners that we've never worked with, and help them understand our challenges and where there might be an opportunity for them to help and improve processes going forward. It is an ongoing and constant conversation that's incredibly important. Our work with some of the outside industry associations as well has really given us some of those benefits. Rumsfeld gets a hard time at times for talking about unknown unknowns. If you don't have conversations with those partners, you're not going to be able to identify and suss those out. So it's been really good.
In an agency that has a lot of opportunity, shall we say, for digitalization, how do you determine what to attack first based on the resources that you have, the bandwidth that you have as far as human capital and so on?
One of the areas that we focused on particularly, Francis, is how do we take those challenges or those opportunities, because I think they're the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Where do you take those challenges and opportunities that can be broken down into a very small and a very specific use case? Some folks want to go for the big bang. There's a school of thought around that. I personally don't agree with it all the time. When you're able to take that larger enterprise-wide challenge and break it down into a series of smaller use cases that you can then test and learn on, it not only reduces the amount of effort, the amount of money, the amount of time that you have to spend on it, but allows you to learn faster and continue to improve. And that, I think, is the crux of the approach. It's really that ability to break it down and understand in a series of days, weeks, or months, as opposed to months, quarters, years, what works well, what doesn't work well, how can we improve? And then if it does work well and it does show promise, how do I tackle the next use case and the next use case and the next use case? That is the approach that we have taken, and it's shown quite a bit of promise.
The business processes point that you made earlier, I think, is really important too, because another thing, as we said, people like to do what they like to do, and they're used to it.
Yeah.
Has that been a challenge to get people to even think about the possibility of changing business processes before you do the digitalization piece?
Francis, actually, more often than not, it's been the exact opposite. Folks have been eager to identify opportunities to change and to adjust how they're doing things. That's one of the things that we've been very intentional about. It would be very silly for me to tell somebody who's been doing work for a day, a year, a month, a decade, this is how we should approach this. Rather, we flip that on its head and we say, what's the challenge that you wish you could adjust? How do you wish that you could change your work to do something better, to do something faster? And you need to gain that trust first, but once you have that trust and folks know that you really are listening, the ideas just start to pour out. And those are the subject matter experts, those are the real experts, boots on the ground, that we listen to the most. We take their challenges, their opportunities, and we help address them as best we can.
And I imagine maintaining that trust, it's important to let them know in some way, we really did hear you and we mean it, that we're going to at least consider taking some action, right?
Absolutely, and on the flip side, that's not something that is possible right now. And that's one of the areas that we focus on. There may be a great technology, there may be a great approach, but it may not just be the right time. And so identifying what's the right time to push forward and really to adopt those changes, whether or not it's a technology or a business process or an incentive, that's the important part, and that's what really gets us to the secret sauce, so to speak.
You have a pretty extensive acquisition background at the agency and across government. You told me once when you were in an acquisition role at the IRS, we have to make sure that we don't just buy technology for the sake of buying technology. How do you avoid that temptation of going for some shiny object and then figuring out a solution in the role that you're in now, Harrison?
We've worked with the experts that I talked about before. We've worked with those experts to really do the incredibly difficult work of distilling a challenge down to the intended outcome. It's not a, I want LLM, I want this, I want that. It's a, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? And it sounds simple on its face, but trying to distill something that somebody might have put previously in a 75-page statement of requirements or a performance work statement down into 3 challenges that are 2 lines, 3 sentences each, it really is difficult. But what it allows us to do is to really identify where our challenges are and what the opportunities might be. And ultimately allows us to open the aperture, whether or not it's to a known partner or someone who's not done work with the agency before, to tackle a challenge in a different way. Because they've said, okay, hey, the government's actually asked me a very specific question, how do I improve this, how do I get to that outcome? And now we've opened up the aperture for innovation, whether or not it comes from a partner that we've done business with for 20 years or someone who says, who's the IRS, I don't know what that stands for.
We have about a minute left. My sense is that if we would have had this conversation 10, 15 years ago, somebody in the government would have said, okay, we have a 5-year plan to digitize and there's a finite destination. We're going to get to that place and then we're done. This is not the kind of transformation, it sounds like, that will ever be done. Is that a fair read on my part?
I believe it's a fair read. I think it is part of the ongoing progression that the IRS has been pursuing and will continue to pursue. Again, what we do today benefits from what folks have done in the past. Hopefully what we do today will benefit folks who come behind us in a year or 2 years or 5 years and helps continue to, that progression to being a digital-first agency.
So very quickly then, how will you measure as you go success if there's not going to be an end state where you say, we made it, we did what we wanted to do, and our work here is done?
I think it's the constant improvement piece, right? When you're targeting areas around processing turns or internal operations, how do we continue to move the needle in a positive fashion and allow us to continue moving forward? If you get to a solution or a space where there's a known end state and you can't get any higher than that, that might be a challenging position to be in.
Harrison Smith, thanks very much for joining me. I appreciate your
sir.
time. You can read more about the digital modernization plan at the IRS at fedgovtoday.com. Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose is back in a moment.